I had been job hunting for months. Despite my impressive degrees and years of experience, finding the right opportunity felt impossible. Every rejection chipped away at my confidence. So when I finally got an interview at Lockhart Enterprises, a company known for its ruthless but successful CEO, Daniel Lockhart, I felt both nervous and hopeful. The moment I stepped into the modern high-rise office, I knew this place was different. Everything about it screamed power. The receptionist led me to a sleek conference room, and soon a woman in a sharp black suit entered. "Miss Carter, I'm Julia Moore, the company's hiring manager," she said with a polite smile. "Mr. Lockhart will be joining us shortly." I nodded, forcing a smile. My hands rested on my lap, fingers intertwined tightly. I needed this job. Minutes later, the door swung open and Daniel Lockhart himself walked in. I had seen his face in business magazines, tall, sharp-jawed, eyes that looked like they could see right through you. He was intimidating in every way. He skimmed through my resume without looking up. "You have quite the impressive background, Miss Carter." "Thank you," I replied carefully. He finally lifted his gaze, his expression unreadable. "Why do you want to work here?" I gave my practiced answer, talking about my passion for the industry and how I admired the company's growth. He listened, nodding slightly, but I could tell something was off. Then he leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said something that made my stomach drop. "You're overqualified." I blinked, caught off guard. I don't think that should be a problem." Lockhart smirked. "It is. People like you don't stay. You'll find something better and leave within months. I don't hire risks." My heart pounded. "I'm willing to commit. Just give me a chance." His smirk faded. "I don't think so. This interview is over." I sat there stunned as he stood up and walked out. Just like that, I was dismissed. I left the building in a daze, anger and humiliation burning in my chest. But what I didn't know was that Daniel Lockhart had just made the biggest mistake of his life, because he had no idea who I really was. I walked out of Lockhart Enterprises with my head held high, but inside, I was boiling. How dare he dismiss me like that, without even giving me a real chance? Overqualified? That was just an excuse. He didn't want to deal with someone who could challenge him. As soon as I got home, I threw my bag onto the couch and sank into a chair, still replaying the moment in my head. My father, Richard Carter, was sitting at the dining table, sipping his evening coffee. He glanced up, immediately reading my face. "Bad interview?" he asked. I let out a bitter laugh. "You could say that. The CEO, Daniel Lockhart, barely gave me 5 minutes before he shut me down. Said I was overqualified." The reaction was instant. My father's entire body stiffened, and his grip on the coffee mug tightened. "Daniel Lockhart?" he repeated, his voice turning cold. I frowned. "Yeah, why?" His jaw clenched. "That man is my biggest rival." I froze. "What?" He exhaled sharply, setting his mug down with a loud clink. "Lockhart and I have been competing in the same industry for years. He's ruthless. We've been at odds in business for a long time, but I never thought he'd be foolish enough to turn away my daughter." Realization washed over me like a cold wave. He hadn't even looked at my last name properly. If he had, he would have known exactly who I was. And now, I had an opportunity, one that I couldn't waste. A slow smile spread across my face. "He fired me before he even hired me," I said. "I think it's time he realizes his mistake." My father's eyes gleamed with the same sharpness that had built his own empire. "Let's make sure he does." Daniel Lockhart had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I wasn't going to sit back and let Daniel Lockhart's arrogance go unchecked. He had underestimated me, and worse, he had dismissed me without a second thought. That was his first mistake. The second, not realizing who I was. I spent the entire day researching Lockhart Enterprises, its strengths, weaknesses, recent business moves. My father, being one of Lockhart's biggest competitors, had plenty of insight. He shared details about the company's ongoing projects, upcoming deals, and most importantly, the cracks in their foundation. "They're about to bid for a major partnership with Westbridge Industries," my father told me over dinner. "It's a big contract. If Lockhart wins, it'll give them a huge advantage." I leaned forward. "And if they lose?" He smirked. "Then they take a serious hit." An idea formed in my mind, one that would make Lockhart regret ever pushing me aside. "What if I help you secure that contract?" I asked. My father raised an eyebrow. "You want to go up against Lockhart directly?" Why not? I said, determination burning inside me. I know how he thinks. I sat across from him, felt his arrogance firsthand. He doesn't see people like me as threats. That's his weakness, and I'm gonna use it. My father studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's do it. For the next few weeks, I worked alongside my father's team, using every skill I had to help craft a proposal stronger than anything Lockhart Enterprises could offer. Every late night, every detail perfected. I poured my frustration into making sure we would win. And finally, the day of the bidding presentation arrived. I walked into the high-rise building where the Westbridge executives were waiting, but the real moment of satisfaction came when I stepped into the conference room, because sitting at the head of the Lockhart Enterprises delegation was none other than Daniel Lockhart himself. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something in them that wasn't arrogance. It was shock. He finally knew who I was, and it was already too late. For a brief second, Daniel Lockhart just stared at me. His sharp, confident demeanor faltered, his eyes narrowing in confusion. He was trying to place me. Then, recognition flashed across his face. I saw the exact moment he realized his mistake. I gave him a polite, almost amused smile as I took my seat across from him. The Westbridge executives greeted both teams, unaware of the silent battle already brewing between Lockhart and me. "This is Miss Carter," my father introduced, his voice calm but laced with pride. "She'll be presenting our proposal." Lockhart's fingers curled slightly against the table. "Carter," he repeated, his voice quiet but heavy with realization. I met his gaze directly. "Yes, we've met before." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He couldn't. Not here. Not in front of everyone. The presentations began, and I watched as Lockhart Enterprises laid out their proposal. It was good, polished, strategic, everything I expected from a company of their size. But there were weaknesses. Small ones, but enough for us to exploit. When it was my turn, I spoke with confidence, presenting a plan that not only matched Lockhart's, but went beyond it. My research, my understanding of the industry, and my insight into Lockhart's approach gave me an edge. I stole a glance at him as I spoke. He was watching me closely, his expression unreadable, but I knew what he was thinking. He had dismissed me as overqualified, and now I was standing in front of him, proving exactly why that had been the worst decision he could have made. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then the head of Westbridge Industries nodded in approval. "Impressive, we'll be making our decisions soon." As we stood to leave, Lockhart approached me, his usual confidence dimmed. "I didn't realize who you were." I tilted my head slightly. "No, you didn't, but you should have." He exhaled sharply, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. "You planned this," I smiled. "No, you did, when you refused to give me a chance." Without another word, I walked away. The decision hadn't been announced yet, but I already knew how this would end. Daniel Lockhart had underestimated me once, dismissing me without a second thought. But I was no longer the same person who had walked into that interview, eager and desperate for a chance. I had proved myself, and I wasn't about to let him make the same mistake again. The days stretched on as I waited for the decision from Westbridge Industries. Each day felt longer than the last, my mind constantly racing with what-ifs and scenarios. But despite the uncertainty, I kept my focus. I had done everything I could. Now, it was just a matter of letting the chips fall where they may. 3 days later, the phone call came. My father's voice, calm as always, echoed through the house. "Ava, come to my office." I didn't need to ask why. I knew exactly what was waiting for me. I found him sitting at his desk, a letter in his hand, his lips curled in that small, knowing smirk he wore when he was about to deliver good news. "They made their choice," he said, his voice steady, but with a hint of pride. He slid the envelope across the desk toward me. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of everything in that single piece of paper. My fingers brushed against it, and I could almost hear the ticking of the clock in the silence that followed. Then, I opened it. My eyes skimmed the text quickly, but the moment I saw the words, "We are pleased to inform you that your proposal has been selected," my heart skipped a beat. We had won. I felt a flood of emotions, relief, triumph, and something deeper, more satisfying. This wasn't just about the contract. It was about proving that I was capable. It was about showing that I could not only stand toe-to-toe with Lockhart, but come out victorious. I looked up at my father, who was watching me with that same small smile, the one that said, "I knew you had it in you." "I knew you could do it," he said softly, his pride evident. I smiled back, feeling a sense of fulfillment I hadn't known I was craving. We did it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands as I carefully unfolded the paper. My heart pounded in my chest, the anticipation building with every passing second. My eyes darted across the words, scanning quickly, searching for the answer I had been waiting for. Then I saw it. We had won the contract. For a moment I just stared at the words, letting them sink in. A rush of emotions surged through me: relief, pride, satisfaction, victory. I had walked into Lockhart Enterprises weeks ago, hoping for a chance, only to be dismissed in under 5 minutes. But now I had done more than just prove myself. I had led the very proposal that outshined his. I had beaten him at his own game. A wide grin broke across my face, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Across the room, my father watched me with knowing amusement, his own expression proud yet relaxed. He chuckled, shaking his head. "You look like you just won a championship." I laughed softly, still holding the letter in my hands. In a way, I did. It wasn't just about the contract. It was about the principle, about knowing my worth, about proving to myself and to Lockhart that I was not someone to be dismissed. The news spread quickly. People in the industry were talking. Lockhart Enterprises had lost a major deal, and it didn't take long before the whispers reached the man himself. But the best part? Daniel Lockhart couldn't ignore it. He had no choice but to acknowledge what he had lost. 2 days later, as I was going through my emails, a new message popped up in my inbox. The subject line made me pause. Subject: "Let's talk." For a second I just stared at it, my heartbeat steady but my mind already racing. I clicked on it, and there it was. His name, his words, his sudden change of tune. "Miss Carter, I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. I'd like to meet and discuss a potential opportunity. Let me know when you're available. Best, Daniel Lockhart." I leaned back, a slow smirk curling at the edges of my lips. So now, after everything, he wanted to talk? I could picture him sitting at his desk, typing out this email with that same controlled, confident air he always carried. Except this time, there was something else beneath it. Regret. I imagined him reading about the contract loss, realizing too late who I was, and then coming to terms with the fact that he had made a mistake that cost him. For a brief moment, I considered ignoring it completely. Let him sit with the consequences of his arrogance. Let him wonder if I ever saw the email, if I even cared enough to respond. But then, an even better idea formed in my mind. I straightened in my chair, my fingers hovering over the keyboard before I began to type. Each word was deliberate, every letter carrying the weight of everything he had dismissed before. "Mr. Lockhart, I appreciate the offer, but I'll have to decline. I don't work for people who underestimate me. Best of luck, Ava Carter." I read it over once, then hit send. A quiet satisfaction settled in my chest as I watched the message disappear into cyberspace, landing in his inbox, just like his rejection had landed in mine weeks ago. Except this time, it was my turn to walk away. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly, as a wave of satisfaction washed over me. For the first time in months, I felt free. Free from the weight of rejection, free from the frustration of being dismissed so easily, and free from the doubt that had crept into my mind after that humiliating interview. I had walked into Lockhart Enterprises hoping for a chance. Instead, I had been cast aside without a second thought. But now, the tables had turned. I glanced at my screen, my last email still glowing on the monitor, the one where I had politely but firmly declined Daniel Lockhart's sudden interest in working with me. I imagined his reaction, the way his jaw must have tightened, the frustration in his eyes when he realized that the same woman he had rejected was now the one slipping right through his fingers. He had underestimated me. He had dismissed me without a second glance. And now, he was finally seeing me for what I was worth. But it didn't matter anymore, because it was already too late. Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to see more content like this, Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And feel free to share with your friends. Your support means the world and helps me keep bringing you fresh, exciting stories. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.